My mother didn't even blink when she said it across the dinner table. "You're not half the woman your sister is." The words hit so hard the room actually tilted. I pushed my chair back, feeling every year I'd kept quiet tighten in my chest and said, "Then she can start paying your rent." Forks froze. My father went pale. "Rent? What rent?" He whispered like the truth might swallow him whole. "Drop a comment, and let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." I didn't wait for my mother to recover from the shock. I didn't wait for my father to ask a second question. I simply stood up, smoothed the napkin on the table next to my untouched plate, and walked out. The silence behind me was heavy, the kind that usually precedes an explosion, but I didn't stick around for the shrapnel. I walked out into the cool Napa Valley night, the air smelling of damp earth and fermentation, and got into my truck. I didn't drive far. My home wasn't the main estate, with its sprawling verandas and heated floors where Chloe and my parents lived. My home was the converted carriage house on the edge of the property, a drafty one-bedroom structure that used to store, tack, and feed. It was cold when I stepped inside, but for the first time in years, the cold didn't bother me. It felt clean. I sat down at my small kitchen island and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark room, illuminating the banking interface I knew better than my own face. There it was. The scheduled transfer set for the first of the month. $4,800, labeled simply as operating costs. I stared at the number. $4,800 a month. $57,600 a year. Over the last 3 years, I had poured exactly $172,800 into the Domain St. Core accounts. That was my savings. That was my salary. That was every bonus I had ever earned. For a long time, I told myself I was doing it to save the legacy. I told myself I was the dutiful daughter, keeping the roof over our heads. But looking at that blinking cursor, I realized the truth was much uglier. I wasn't paying a mortgage. I was paying a membership fee. Psychologists call it financial enmeshment, but in my head, it was just the trap of normalized cruelty. I had been conditioned to believe that my money was the only rent I could pay for existing in this family. I believed that if I just made the business solvent, if I just fixed one more disaster, if I just wrote one more check, my mother would finally look at me the way she looked at Chloe. I thought I could buy my way into being loved. But love shouldn't have a price tag, and it certainly shouldn't cost you your dignity. I thought about the root canal I had put off for 6 months because I needed the cash to repair the bottling line. I thought about the space heater I used in the winter because the insulation in the carriage house was non-existent, while Chloe posted stories from the sauna in the master suite. I had set myself on fire to keep them warm, and they hadn't even noticed the smoke. I moved the mouse to the cancel button. My finger hovered over the trackpad. A year ago, this would have made me panic. I would have terrified myself with thoughts of the winery collapsing, of my father's disappointment. But tonight, there was no panic. There was only the cold, hard math of a bad investment. I clicked. The screen refreshed. Transfer canceled. The notification popped up, confirming the action, and I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. It wasn't just a financial transaction. It was an eviction notice for the guilt I had carried for a decade. I closed the laptop. The winery was on its own, and so was I. The next morning, the sun rose over the Domain St. Core just like it always did, painting the vines in gold and hiding the rot at the roots. I had been up since 4 a.m. The harvest waits for no one, and certainly not for family drama. I was out in Block 4, checking the sugar levels of the Cabernet grapes, my boots caked in mud, my hands sticky with juice. This was the reality of a winery. It is agriculture. It is dirt, and science, and sweat. But if you looked at our Instagram feed, you would think it was just endless sunsets and linen dresses. At 10 o'clock, 6 hours after I started my shift, Chloe rolled up the driveway in her white convertible. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a matcha latte, looking like she had just stepped out of a magazine ad, which, in her mind, she had. She was the brand ambassador. That was the title my mother invented to justify putting her on the payroll for $60,000 a year. I watched her set up a ring light near the crushing pad, complaining loudly to a harvest intern about the dust. She wasn't an employee. She was a liability. She was a garnish on a plate that was empty. I kept working. Data in, data out. I was calculating the yield estimates when my father, Richard, found me. He looked older in the daylight, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. He wasn't wearing his usual crisp suit. He looked frayed. "Elodie," he said, his voice hesitant. "About last night. What you said about rent." I paused, my pen hovering over the clipboard. I waited for him to ask the real question. I waited for him to act like the CEO he claimed to be, and demand an audit. But before I could speak, Kimberly materialized. My mother had a sixth sense for loss of control. She swept in between us, placing a hand on my father's arm. Her smile tight and terrifying. "Oh, Richard, don't badger her," she said, her voice dripping with artificial concern. "Elodie is just exhausted. You know how she gets during harvest. A little hysterical, a little confused. She's been working too hard, and I think she's jealous of Chloe's new campaign. It makes people say crazy things." She looked at me then. It wasn't a look of motherly concern. It was a warning shot. She was daring me to speak. She was betting that my habit of silence was stronger than my newfound spine. I didn't take the bait. I didn't argue. I just looked at her, then at my father, who was already nodding, accepting the easy lie over the hard truth. He wanted to believe I was just tired. It was easier than believing he was broke. I walked away, but as I headed back to the office, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It wasn't a work email. It was a text from my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister. It was a screenshot. It was from a family group chat called the St. Core Inner Circle. A chat I wasn't in. The timestamp was from 5 minutes ago. My mother had written, "Please pray for Elodie. She's having a breakdown. She's threatening to sabotage the winery finances because she can't handle Chloe's success. We might have to remove her from operations for her own mental health. It's so hard, watching your child spiral." Below it, Chloe had reacted with a sad face emoji. I stared at the screen. The sun was warm, but my blood ran cold. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was a preemptive strike. My mother knew I had stopped the money. She knew the checks would bounce. So she was destroying my credibility before I could tell anyone why. She was painting me as unstable so that when the truth finally came out, it would look like the ravings of a jealous sister. It was smart. It was ruthless. And it was the final confirmation I needed. I wasn't dealing with a mother. I was dealing with a hostile competitor. And you don't argue with competitors. You audit them. I didn't reply to Aunt Patricia. I didn't text my mother to demand an explanation. I didn't post a defense on social media. Engaging with a lie only gives it oxygen, and I intended to suffocate this fire, not fan it. I put my phone away and went back to work. I finished the yield estimates. I scheduled the picking crews for the North Block. I finalized the shipping manifest for the distributor in Chicago. I did my job, because that is what professionals do. But when the sun went down, and the lights in the main house finally flickered out, I stopped being the dutiful daughter. I became the chief operating officer. I waited until 2 a.m. The estate was silent, save for the distant call of a coyote in the hills. I let myself into the main house, using the keypad code my mother thought was secure her birthday. The hallway smelled of beeswax and lavender, the scent of a home that was meticulously maintained to hide the rot in the walls. I didn't go to my parents' bedroom to scream. I went to the study. This was the nerve center of Domaine St. Core. Mahogany bookshelves, leather chairs, and a massive oak desk where my father liked to sit and play the part of the illustrious vintner. But he didn't run this business. He was the figurehead. My mother controlled the checkbook. I sat in his chair and turned on the desk lamp, keeping the beam low. I wasn't here to look at the operating costs I had already paid. I knew those numbers by heart. I was here to find the bleed. You don't lose money this fast just on bad marketing or a poor harvest. There was a hemorrhage somewhere, deep in the arteries of the business, and I was going to find it. I pulled the physical ledgers from the safe. My mother was old-fashioned. She didn't trust the cloud with the real numbers. She kept 2 sets of books, one for the IRS and one for herself. I had always respected her privacy, believing she was just being cautious. Now, I realized she was being criminal. I opened the heavy, leather-bound book, the pages crinkled, dry and brittle. I started 5 years back. The first year was standard. Lean, but manageable. The second year showed a dip. Then, 3 years ago, right before I started paying the operating costs, there was a massive injection of cash. $300,000. Labeled as private investment. I frowned. We didn't have private investors. My father prided himself on the winery being family-owned, family-grown. He would never have sold equity. I traced the entry. It didn't come from a sale. It came from a deposit. I moved to the filing cabinet, my fingers flying over the hanging folders. Bank statements, tax returns, vendor contracts. I bypassed them all. I went to the back, to a dusty accordion folder, simply labeled miscellaneous. That's where the secrets always live. In the unclassified dark. I pulled out a stack of papers. Insurance policies, old warranties. And then, at the bottom, a thick document with a bank logo I recognized. It wasn't our business bank. It was a private lender, the kind that charges interest rates that border on usury. I opened it. And the world tilted again. It was a mortgage agreement. But not for the winery. It was a second mortgage on the estate itself. The home we lived in. The home my father had inherited from his grandfather. The date was stamped 5 years ago. The amount was staggering. But that wasn't what made my breath catch in my throat. It was the signature line. Richard St. Cyr. My father's name was there, scrawled in black ink, but it wasn't his signature. My father wrote with a heavy, blocky hand. A remnant of his days drafting architectural plans before he inherited the vines. This signature was loopy, practiced, and feminine. It was my mother's handwriting trying to be my father's. I stared at the forgery, feeling a wave of nausea. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was fraud. This was a felony. My mother had leveraged the entire family legacy, without my father's knowledge, to fund. What? I flipped to the next page. A wire transfer receipt. The destination account was in Los Angeles. The beneficiary? Chloe St. Cyr. Talent management, escrow. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. 5 years ago, that was when Chloe had moved to LA to pursue acting. That was when she'd posted photos from premiere parties and red carpets, claiming she had booked a pilot. She hadn't booked anything. My mother had been bankrolling her lifestyle, paying for acting classes, headshots, and rent in West Hollywood, all funded by a secret mortgage on the vineyard. And when the money ran out, when Chloe came home to help the family, my mother had simply shifted the burden to me. She had let me drain my savings to pay the interest on a loan that had been taken out to fund Chloe's delusions. The narcissistic injury, that's the term. My mother couldn't let Chloe fail because Chloe was her masterpiece. Chloe was the beautiful, famous extension of herself. If Chloe was a failure, then Kimberly was a failure. So she would burn the entire estate to the ground, lie to her husband, and exploit her other daughter just to keep the golden child shining. I took out my phone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took high-resolution photos of every single document. The mortgage, the forged signature, the wire transfers, the credit card statements showing thousands spent on wardrobe consultation and image maintenance. I compiled them into a single PDF file. I named it Investor Prospectus, St. Cyr. Then, I printed 10 copies on the high-quality bonded paper my father saved for special contracts. I bound them using the spiral machine in the corner. It was 4 a.m. when I finished. The sky outside was turning a bruised purple. I walked out of the main house, locking the door behind me. I had the evidence. I had the truth. And in 48 hours, at the Vintage Launch Gala, I was going to serve it. The St. Cyr Vintage Launch Gala was designed to be the event of the season. My mother had spent the last of the credit line on it, imported orchids, a string quartet from San Francisco, and enough vintage champagne to drown a small village. The barrel room had been transformed into a cathedral of amber light and old wood, smelling of oak and money. I arrived late. I wasn't wearing my work boots or my stained denim jacket. I was wearing a tailored black suit I had bought for my interviews in Oregon. I didn't come to drink. I came to close the deal. I stood in the shadows of the archway, holding the stack of bound dossiers against my chest like a shield. My mother was on the stage, holding a microphone, glowing in the spotlight. She looked regal. She looked like the matriarch of a dynasty that wasn't currently leveraging its own soil to pay for a daughter's vanity project. "We are so blessed," Kimberly said, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. "This harvest has been challenging. But we survived. And we didn't just survive, we thrived. And I have to give credit where it is due." She gestured dramatically to Chloe, who was standing stage left, looking demure in silk. "To my daughter Chloe. Her genius marketing, her vision, her ability to connect with the world. She saved this vintage. She saved us." The applause was polite but enthusiastic. Chloe beamed, waving to the crowd like a starlet. My father stood next to her, clapping the hardest, his face full of proud, blind love. "And," my mother added, her tone shifting to that familiar, patronizing pity, "we also want to thank Elodie, who works so hard in the fields. We hope she finds her path soon." That was the cue. I stepped out of the shadows. I didn't take the microphone. I didn't scream. I just walked straight to the VIP table, where the 3 primary investors sat. They were men who understood numbers, not narratives. I placed a copy of the investor prospectus in front of each of them. Then I walked to the stage. My mother froze. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flash of panic that she quickly tried to mask. "Elodie," she hissed, away from the mic. "What are you doing? Get out." I ignored her. I walked up to my father. He looked confused, his hands half raised as if to welcome me, or maybe to stop me. "I brought the supplementary data for the launch," I said, my voice calm, factual, lethal. I handed him the dossier. "Read page 4, Dad." He looked at me, then at the booklet. He opened it. The room was buzzing with low conversation, glasses clinking, the quartet playing Vivaldi. But in my ears, there was only the sound of paper turning. He saw the mortgage. He saw the wire transfers to Chloe St. Cyr, talent management escrow. He saw the credit card statements. And then, he saw the signature. I watched the color drain from his face. It wasn't a slow fade. It was instant. He looked at the signature, the loopy, feminine forgery of his own name. And then he looked at his wife. "Richard?" Kimberly whispered, her voice tight. "Richard, don't look at that. It's just Elodie being dramatic again." My father didn't answer. He looked at the investors. They were already flipping through the pages, their expressions shifting from bored to alarmed. One of them pulled out his phone, likely to call his lawyer. My father turned to Kimberly. The look on his face wasn't anger, it was horror. It was the look of a man realizing he had been sleeping next to an arsonist while his house burned down. "You forged my name," he said. His voice was quiet, but the microphone caught it. The quartet stopped playing. "You stole the equity," he said, louder this time. "For her?" He pointed at Chloe. "I did it for us!" Kimberly shrieked, the mask finally slipping. "I did it to keep up appearances!" "We have a reputation, Richard. Chloe is a star. She needed support." "And Elodie?" Richard asked. He looked at me then. "Who supported Elodie?" "Elodie is fine," Kimberly snapped. "She's strong. She can handle it. She's just the help, Richard. She's always just been the help." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a guillotine blade hitting the block. She had said the quiet part out loud. She had admitted, in front of everyone who mattered, that my value was conditional on my servitude. I didn't need to say another word. The dossier had done the work. The investors were standing up, buttoning their jackets, signaling the end of the St. Cyr line. My father was looking at his wife like she was a stranger. Chloe was crying, not because she was sorry, but because her audience had turned hostile. I turned around and walked out. I didn't look back. The air outside was cool and smelled of jasmine and ruin. I got into my truck and drove away, leaving them to the harvest they had sown. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. I didn't stay to watch the investors pull their funding, but I heard about it. By Monday, the bank had initiated foreclosure on the second mortgage. By Wednesday, The local papers were running stories about the St. Cyr scandal. Richard didn't stay either. He kicked Kimberly out of the main house that night. She went to stay with her sister Patricia, but even Patricia, who had helped spread the lies about me, wouldn't tolerate the fraud. Kimberly ended up in a motel off the highway, alone with her delusions. Chloe tried to pivot. She posted a tearful video about being a victim of financial abuse, claiming she didn't know where the money came from. But the internet is unforgiving, and the receipts were public. Her brand deals evaporated overnight. She moved back to Los Angeles, but this time, there was no secret fund to pay her rent. She got a job as a hostess. It was honest work. Finally, the morning after the gala, I was packing the last of my boxes in the carriage house when my father knocked on the door. He looked like a ghost. He was wearing the same suit from the night before, wrinkled and stained. "Elodie," he said, his voice raspy, "please, don't go." I kept packing. "I have a job in Oregon, Dad. I start in 3 days." "I'll match it," he said, desperate. "I'll double it. I'm firing your mother. I'm taking back control. I want you to be CEO. I'll give you equity, half the winery. Hell, take it all. Just help me save it." I stopped. I looked at him. He was offering me everything I had ever wanted. Validation. Ownership. The legacy. I looked out the window at the vines. I loved this land. I had bled for this soil. But then I looked back at the man offering it to me. He wasn't offering it because he valued me. He was offering it because he was drowning, and I was the only life raft he knew. "I can't," I said. "Why?" he pleaded. "It's your home." "No," I said gently. "It was never my home. It was my workplace, and I'm resigning." I handed him the keys to the carriage house. "You can sell the grapes to the neighbors," I told him. "They'll pay a fair price. It might cover the debt if you liquidate the equipment. But you have to do it, Dad." "Not me." I walked out to my truck. I didn't look back at the estate. I didn't look back at the life I had tried so hard to buy. As I drove north, watching the Napa Valley fade in my rearview mirror, I realized something. The sovereignty of the walk away isn't about leaving people behind. It's about leaving the version of yourself that tolerated their treatment. I didn't leave to punish them. I left to stop punishing myself. You cannot heal in the same soil that poisoned you. And as I crossed the state line into Oregon, the air tasted different. It didn't smell like fermentation and secrets. It smelled like rain. It smelled like a future I didn't have to pay for. If you've ever had to walk away from something you loved just to save yourself, tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And don't forget to follow for more stories about breaking the cycle.